This is another brand new episode of Flyers Daily here on the Flyers Broadcast Network. Flyers Daily is always brought to you by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. I'm Brian Smith, sitting in this week for Jason Myrtetus on Mondays with Meltzer. And Bill Meltzer here along with us. Bill, again, it's been a week here for the Flyers as they went through that stretch where they didn't have a lot of games. But now here we are starting 4-6 to wrap up the season. And I guess, first of all, we'll give our best to Jason, who, again, is out this week. And everybody send him a stick tap or two on social media if you're following along with him. We'll hope to have him back later on this week. Flyers do wrap up the home portion of the schedule tomorrow night, and I know he's hoping to be back there for that one. But it's coming to a close here real quick, and it's been a pretty good run here for the Flyers over the last couple of weeks. Of course, now 5-1-1 under Brad Shaw after that overtime loss in Ottawa. And the Ottawa game, I guess for me, it just kind of epitomized what the season has been for this team, because they're coming in playing a rested team on their home rink, of course, and you got flights the night before and all that stuff that goes into going across the border. But they came out and were scrappy this entire contest. Ottawa didn't lead until they won the game. Outshot them, and then they had the 22 blocked shots in that contest as well. And they don't get the 2 points, but they can certainly look at this weekend as a good one here as they look to continue this effort to have a good end of the season.
Oh, well, one thing you can absolutely say about the Flyers this season, last season, it's a resilient team. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the compete level on the team, and I think that one thing that to look for an improvement a year from now is the Flyers have to have a better record in the second half of back-to-backs. That was really costly this season to the team, or a game such as Sunday's game where 2 points are on the table and you come away with one, and those add up over the course of a season. I thought the Flyers played a pretty decent game all around. And you got contributions from the fourth line, which it's always a bonus when you get that. So there are things that you can look at in terms of just finishing the right way, because that's you don't carry momentum from year to year, but there are things you can learn about players in these situations.
Yeah.
And about how you plan things going ahead. I mean, really, that's what these games are in April.
Yeah, I mean, again, looking at momentum year to year, it's certainly a funny thing for a franchise. And you're right. You've seen very, I think, few situations in the last decade or so where you have a team that just comes in and they're just as dominant the next year as they were the year before. I mean, obviously Florida, they win their cup after almost getting there the year before, and you have the two consecutive ones for Tampa, which again, I've always kind of thought they benefited in a big way from the COVID situation, because during those 2 years nobody could really do much to their roster. Cap was almost frozen, and you just couldn't do much to improve your team. So they had that luxury there. They were already good going into that one. But I think one of the things we are looking at here from year to year is the individuals that took a step, and how that kind of works back into the big scheme of things here for the Flyers, and how they're going to plan to move forward. And I think you look back at half a dozen guys that have taken that step this year, and I guess the hottest one as of late is Tyson Forster here with the 5 goals in the 2 games before the Ottawa game. Almost had consecutive hat tricks there, just a little bit of a bouncing puck away from an empty netter in the game on Saturday. But I really think he's one of those guys that has taken one of those steps, and that's, again, forming the framework here for what the front office is going to do in the offseason.
Yeah, and I'll add to that it's not just this run at the end of the season. Now the numbers are catching up just because he's gotten so hot late in the season, going from 20 goals, a year ago to you get 25, 26 this year over the remainder of the season. It's there for him to do that. But I think that he's playing well almost the entire season. Remember, he got off to a slow start, was actually scratched a game, but then once he got on track and once that line was put together with Noah Cates, Bobby Brink, and Forster, all three of them took nice steps this year. I think Brink's all around game might have been one of the most improved guys in the team in that regard. And Forster to me, I look at him as a guy who I think he could take another step a year from now, where next year could be a 30-goal guy. He has all the capabilities to do that. And I'll tell you one thing that he's been doing lately that I really hope does carry over into next season. This season, for the most part, pucks were not going in for him from the flank, which was probably the only disappointing part of his game, because when he was drafted, the number one asset that got him drafted in the first round was that huge shot that he has. Last year, he was scoring a little bit from the top of the circle on his off wing down to the dot. This year, those pucks weren't going in. Most of those were the dirty kind of goals at the net, right? Deflections, rebounds. As he started to get hot lately, scores some that way, but he was also starting to score some from a little bit further distance. And if he can do that with a consistent basis next year to make teams respect that big shot that he has, in addition to his ability to score in close, that's where I think he could take the next jump to be a 30-goal guy a year from now. So that line, whether they were scoring or not, I know that in the latter part of the year, it didn't show in the points for Noah Cates for a while there. He got hot for a couple months offensively, and the numbers weren't showing, but his game was the same. And one thing that Forster actually said was one thing he admires about Brink, and he thinks everybody on the team can emulate. And I think it's a good point. He said, whether Noah's scoring or not scoring, you never know it by how he prepares, by how he just stays kind of on that even keel. That could be hard for a player, really, whatever their role is, right? But because everybody wants to feel like they're contributing in different ways. If the Flyers can add that piece in the top six to where, because I kind of think that third line center spot is really the sweet spot for Cates, where there's not as much pressure on him maybe to carry so much offensively, which just by circumstance and necessity, that became a bigger part of his responsibility. But I think playing that 200-foot game that he plays, the way that he forechecks, the way that he'll backtrack on a play to circle back, track back on a play. I mean, all those things, game in or game out, whether the Flyers were winning at a given time or not, that line was very reliable. And I do think the plan as of now is to probably go into next year with that line intact and see where that goes. So I do think that the emergence of those players to take that bigger bite of the team, take that next step, was a positive. And in terms of somebody who came on a little bit later in the season, I'm really interested to see. This was really Ryan Poehling's first real extended chance to play up in the lineup a little bit, and he's taking advantage of it. I mean, he's earned those points. Got a couple of bounces. You always need a couple of bounces, but I think the way Poehling has played and the way that Peltier has played too. Now he's getting a chance to play. Of all the guys who kind of benefited with the coaching change, with an opportunity to play a little bit more, I think that Peltier has been one of the main guys doing that. Even in Ottawa, he didn't get a point, but he was using his speed effectively. I really like how that line, the pace that line plays with, because all three guys are plus skaters, and it's also easy to forget sometimes that all three of those guys were first-round picks,
right,
in their original organization. So there's a reason they're there. There is some talent there, even if they're not, even a Poehling or Peltier will never be real high-end scorers. There is talent there, and they can be contributing pieces that can contribute that element of playing with pace and showing a little bit of creativity. I think that Peltier particularly is a pretty clever little passer, honestly.
Yeah, a bunch of different ways to go from here, and I'll start with the line you mentioned, the Cates Forster Brink line. I've long looked at NHL, personnel decisions in the fact that I don't think they happen in a vacuum. I don't think that a player that comes out and has, I mean, obviously there's special players out there, right, that have they're going to have big seasons offensively, regardless of who they play with or who's out there. But I think there's more players than that who have had good seasons, but then the personnel around them changes, and then they're not as effective with other folks that have been put in. I'm wondering. I look at that line, that Cates Forster Brink line, and again, I think you're probably right that they'd love to keep that line together next year, because I think right now those three players play best with each other, better than perhaps they would with other players. And again, you can mess with lines and stuff over the course of a season, but I don't know that right now anyway that those guys are as effective with other players as they are with the ones around them right now. But that's part of their development too, that they might develop into those players that can move up and down the lineup a little more.
No, for sure. And I think with the elements in a successful line, to me, is that hopefully you have one guy who's a good distributor. You have one guy who's good on the walls, and you have one guy who's a little bit more of a shooter. And ideally, in a really good line, some guys could do more than one of those things. But I think you need all three of those elements. A guy who can grind a little bit. Obviously you have some speed in that line. A guy could distribute it, and a guy who can finish. The other part of it too is the puck support has to be strong. What's really stood out to me with that line with Cates has been they play very connected as a line. So there's never a big gap. If someone else has to come in to help win a battle, that guy's there, right? And if somebody has to rotate up high, if a defenseman pinches in, that support is there. They're not a static line. They're always in the battle, and they're always anticipating where the next play will be. Because I think a lot of times where players, and many times they're skilled players, but where they get in trouble, they get a little stationary sometimes. And when you're flat-footed, that's when you get in trouble.
And again, going off of some of the other guys that have had these opportunities here, when you're looking at Ryan Poehling and Jacob Pelletier in particular, and just kind of what's transpired here over the past few weeks. We've talked a lot about the players trying to make an impression here, and for some guys, it might be to get that next contract, whether it's here or somewhere else. For other guys, it might be, hey, I want to be here for the long haul, for this rebuild to continue. I want to be part of it. I don't want to be one of the pieces that's moved out, per se. But I think too, it's also a little bit of an audition for Brad Shaw, who is obviously right now the interim head coach, has stated publicly, of course, as anybody would, that he would like to be the head coach. He has been a coach in this league now for going on 30 years. It's getting there really close here. He's played all these roles, but he's never been a full-time head coach, as he mentioned in a press conference recently, that gets to run everything from the summer onward through training camp and into the season. He's only had that interim opportunity. And I look at those two guys in particular, and obviously everybody sees the 5-1-1 record, and wow, he's doing great, yada yada yada. But I think what we've kind of seen here, John Tortorella was dead set on his philosophy, and he was going to make sure everybody played the right way. That the defensive side of the game was there, that people are blocking shots, that sort of thing. That's been, laid the foundation, right? That's there. It's going to stay there. But I think what you're seeing in Brad Shaw now is that, he has made some subtle little adjustments that has brought out the best in certain guys. And that's probably what you need out of your next head coach, is somebody that's going to bring the best out of the players that they have now. This team was god awful defensively when John Tortorella took over, and he and Brad Shaw and the rest of the staff have fixed that. now it might be time to, again, tweak it a little more. So you're bringing the best out of the guys that you have. And I think Shawsey's certainly shown that he's been able to do that here in this short run.
Yeah, and with such a short duration remaining in the season, he had the advantage of having been part of every practice. The whole duration, as opposed to something, you might move up your AHL coach for the rest of the year, like when Scott Gordon moved up as interim coach. He was going from the Phantoms to the Flyers. But I mean, you're not going to overhaul systems. You're not going to have enough time to do that. You're not going to have practices to do that. So you're also, you're going to make little adjustments. You're going to see what works, what doesn't work. And it's definitely an adjustment going from assistant coach to head coach. I mean, that's now Bradshaw had some head coaching opportunities in the minor leagues. And as you said, the two interim stints in the NHL, I wouldn't be disappointed if Shawsey got that opportunity finally to do that. I think he's worked hard for it. I think his success as an assistant coach almost worked against him in a way, in terms of being a head coach. I mean, for a lot of years, I call it Craig Ramsey syndrome, because boy, Rammer's just a great assistant coach. That's his role, right? And and everybody wants that opportunity to be a head coach. Whether it'll be Bradshaw or not, we'll see. My gut feeling is that the Flyers might go in another direction, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Certainly he has earned an interview to do it. He's earned the right to whoever, it'll ultimately be up to the next head coach, if it's not Bradshaw, who he wants on his staff. But to me, I would like to see him, if not as head coach, have the opportunity to continue to run the penalty kill, continue to coach the young defensemen, which he's done a really good job at. He brought some guys along, very effectively. So I think also that once a coach gets into his 60s, and Brad's in his early 60s now, if you haven't been a head coach before, it's kind of now or never to do it.
Right.
So, I think that certainly he's building a bit of a case for himself. And, I also think that he brings a little bit of a different voice, obviously at a lower volume, but also with a little bit of a lighter touch, right? If he's not happy with how somebody's playing, he will tell them. But I think that but he has a different approach. Although he clearly has a lot of respect, which he'll bring out all the time because he works so long with John Tortorella. But he has his own ideas and his own approach to things. So I do think that he's earned a shot. If the Flyers go in that direction, it wouldn't disappoint me. But whether he's the next head coach, whether he stays in as an assistant, or whether he moves on from the organization, I do think he's accomplished a lot of good things behind the scenes in a lot of subtle ways in his time here. The last part of it being that although the Flyers did give up that game-winning power play goal to Ottawa at the end of the game, the penalty kill was up near the top of the NHL, so the very late stages of last year. The first quarter of the season, they were up near the top. Then it hit a rut for a while, and then I think it struggled largely because of the Scott Lawton trade and the injury to Hathaway. Those are two big pieces in the PK. That was a big adjustment. But now they're kind of finishing back on an upswing again. I think he's a very good PK coach too. So I think he's been a very valuable part of the staff, a guy who's a lot of players have learned from, and that's something that, whether it's moving forward with him on the staff or with somebody else, is something that the team can take forward, because he's taught them a lot of good things.
Yeah, and kind of expanding on what you said about him being such a good assistant coach. I mean, we've seen what he's done with Rasmus Ristolainen and really the rest of the Flyers defense. And the thought did cross my mind, when he becomes, the head coach, it's like, well, the one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is that when you're a head coach, your work schedule is almost completely changed in terms of some of the duties you have to fulfill. You have to go talk to the media every day. You've got other obligations on your time that is going to create a situation where he's got to change what he does. He can't just sit there and break down video of the defense all day. He talked a little bit about what it was like to move from the role of running the defense to the head job, and it's certainly different. You didn't want to lose all the stuff that he's able to put into the way he was working as an assistant, but at the same time, that doesn't mean from the head job he might show more qualities that we haven't even seen yet because he hasn't had the opportunity. I also wonder if it's more beneficial for the Flyers at this time in the rebuild to have somebody who's been here through the whole rebuild. I don't know if you bring in an outside voice will certainly change some of the perspectives on things, but whether or not that's beneficial, you'd have to really think about it, I think. So who knows where it's going to go from here, but certainly I think he's putting his best foot forward, just as a lot of other players are as well. And I'll circle back to Tyson Forster. Obviously he's been on fire. He's got 11 points, I think, in the last 10 games or something like that. And, even before that, even when you looked at the stat line, like if you look at it now, you'll certainly see there's a jump, right? If you're just looking at the stats and you're thinking, okay, how'd this player do this year? You see the jump now. It was not there maybe 6 games ago. So there goes Cat. Maybe it was, looking like he was having a similar year in terms of his stats. And he's even taken a few less shots this year, and he's played just a little bit fewer minutes. But I think where his biggest improvement has come is his play away from the puck. And that's something that we saw, I think, from earlier in this season, is his play away from the puck is just improved a great deal. And that's what makes him able to, I think, take that next step offensively that he's taken here in the last couple of weeks, because, if he's just taking the offensive step, but defensively, he doesn't raise his game up to NHL standards, it's hard to keep him in there under certain circumstances. I just feel like that's as big an improvement as he's made is, play away from the puck, play defensively. Obviously he was already a hot shot scoring forward when the Flyers drafted him. And now he's bringing that along, as well as the defensive side that he's learned so well here over the last few months.
Yeah. One of the biggest and hardest lessons for young players to learn is when you can really tighten up your off puck game, that actually leads to better scoring chances at the other end because of the turnovers you create. And that's a bit of a selling job from a coach to a player, because you don't have to play that way in junior hockey. The players say that in junior hockey, like, you could get away with so much more, right? And you could blow the zone, sooner, or or you could overstay some shifts and you'd still up scoring a goal. Where in the NHL now you're facing a 3-on-1 the other way. You're too tired to get back.
Then you get to the NHL and you got to break all those habits, right?
Exactly. And that takes time. Forster's a guy who's been learning those lessons and he's becoming a better player for it.
I guess real quick, as far as looking at some of the guys that have been coming through here over the years, we saw a very similar situation here to Shane Gostisbehere coming out of Union 11 years ago, as Western Michigan University wins the national championship, their first ever, and they have a great season with Alex Bump, and now he's looking to come probably take that next step. We're still waiting for it to be official, but again, it's one of those situations where you've got a guy coming that maybe wasn't necessarily on the radar a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden that kind of changes your outlook. But you and I talked a little bit about him and in Prospect Pipeline the other day, just kind of where he's come from with Western and everything that he's done here over the last year or so. Also, Devin Kaplan was in that championship game too for BU. So you got a couple of guys that are to come into the organization here at some point with really incomparable experience, having been on a championship run, which at any level, obviously the Stanley Cup is above the Calder Cup is above a national championship, but the process to get there at each level is pretty similar.
Yeah, and so is the general need in developing a player for him to be even if the numbers don't always show it year to year to year. I mean, you would love if it did, but it doesn't always happen. But just to be a little better, a little more well-rounded season to season, and Bump is a great example of that. People say, well, how was he a 5th-round pick? Because he was a really good high school player in Minnesota, always showed hands, had the big numbers at those levels. Well, he had to improve his skating, and he had to improve away from the puck. And so his time in the USHL and then his seasons at Western Michigan, each year he became a little better, a little more complete. And obviously the numbers went along with it this year, but there was good reason why he was in the Hobie Baker discussion. I obviously didn't end up winning it, but he was in the discussion as a potential candidate this year, and certainly was a crucial piece to why Western Michigan won the championship this year. I think so much so that it would not be a surprise if he obviously he's got to prove it in camp, but would not be a surprise if he opened next year in the NHL rather than with the Phantoms. I mean, I think he's advanced enough to be in the discussion for that.
And again, we've talked about this too. Just him, if you look at it, being one of what's coming. I mean, now you've got a situation next year where you've added Carson Dorwart, you've got Alex Bump most likely coming, you've got Carson Bjarnason coming, and you've got the guys from London coming. The other couple of potential members of this law firm that are
Barkey, Bonk, and Bump.
We got Brink already here. At any rate, I mean that's half a dozen, right? That are all guys that you can be excited about. And that's not to mention Nikita Grabenkin, who we almost saw yesterday, and what he might bring to the table. He comes over in the Scott Lawton deal. Will Pelletier as an RFA still be part of it? Came over in the Calgary deal, and then all the draft picks you got coming. I mean, but just those 6, 7, 8 guys that are going to be in the picture this year that were not in the Flyers picture, immediate picture anyway, a year ago. That is that is a lot of reason, I think, for excitement for what's ahead.
Yeah, I mean, competition is a good thing. So there's enough talent there where guys can compete for spots. There's enough depth where maybe 1 or 2 of these guys are involved in a move to try to shore up another area, right? Pieces to a trade. So we'll see where all that goes. But certainly like you mentioned Pelletier again. I mean, I think he's shown enough where I don't even think it's a question mark is whether you give him a qualifying offer or not.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be in that mix to compete for a spot. And then you have to look at the mix that you have, Pelletier's a smaller guy and Bobby Brink's a smaller guy, right? So you're going to want to add some size maybe on the wings and, but you want to have a diverse group of players. You want to be able to mix the different skill sets that you have. Well, if you have enough depth, it doesn't mean that it's not a good player you're moving, but it means you have enough depth maybe to withstand a deal with him to fill a hole somewhere else. So, all that stuff is on the table. I think this is a crucial offseason. We'll talk about it more after the season. But this is a critical offseason where I think the right moves, right decisions have to be made. And if the Flyers don't take the next step in the rebuild next year to where they are either in a playoff spot or at least seriously competing for a spot they did a year ago with a little bit, to me, a little bit less of a roster, honestly, than I think they'll have next year. To me, that would be a disappointment.
Well, let's call it a week, Bill. Thanks for jumping in here. And again, we'll give our best to Jason and hopefully see him here over this final week of the season. Believe it or not, we're down to the last, 5-6 days here. And then we're going to have certainly breakup day coming up and a lot of things ahead. So it's always a little bit sad to see a season come to an end, but I think there's a lot of reason for optimism here, right?
I agree. No, I agree. I'm really looking forward to see what the Flyers do the offseason, this draft, and then the little break you get when the season is over. I think before too long, you're starting to count down the weeks till the next camp.
Well, we'll put a wrap on this edition of Flyers Daily. Again, we'll have Jason back with us later this week, and 2 more games left on the docket, starting on Tuesday, the home finale against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Tickets available at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com. This has been Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.